This week's case is about fraud, murder, and what could happen if you care more about what people think of you. So, let's get started. Hello everyone, my name is Brandy, and it's time for a true crime case or mystery with one or more of my fabulous felines. I had somebody behind me. Oh, she's up there now. If you are a returning subscriber, welcome back, my feline friends, and a big shout out to my feline fans who help support this channel. Sorry about not having a video for about a month. I had a great time on my vacation. It was very much needed. I caught my biggest walleye ever, so it made everything all worth it. I did throw it back. Minnesota is such a beautiful place. I always feel very relaxed up there, always have a great time. And then I have to come back to reality where my job is still busy. I thought it would slow down a bit after this big project, but it's still busy, so I'm trying to work that scheduling out. So I am sorry this video is late, but I thank you for hanging in there with me. I really do hope things will slow down. Hopefully in the winter I could start doing more videos again. I just really need things to slow down. I haven't even had a chance to do, meet the felines on all the felines. So I need more time in the day. I understand now why people strive to become full-time YouTubers, because it takes so much time between research, filming the video, and then editing the video, and then, making sure you're meeting all of YouTube's guidelines and stuff. It's a lot of work. Anyway, merch update. There's currently a sale on my merch site. The link is in the description box down below. It's $15. T-shirts, tanks, V-necks, and I believe everything else is on sale as well. So go get your merch if you've been waiting for a sale. And we'll get started on this true crime story. I said true crime. Oh my God. I've been watching too much of Better Off Rhode, who is another true crime creator. She's very entertaining to watch. So she calls her stories true crime instead of true crime. So yeah, I was getting caught up on her videos and whoops. But go check her out. I'll put her link to her channel in the description box below. Okay, let's get started on this case. Christopher Hightower. He grew up in Winter Haven, Florida in the early 60s. Christopher was the oldest of 4 children, and he had a typical family upbringing. He had a stay-at-home mother, and his father worked as a printer. Now, when Christopher was in his early teens, he found out a family secret. He found out that his father was actually his stepfather. You see, his mother got pregnant at a young age when she was a teenager, and the biological father, actually abandoned them both when she was 17 years old. Luckily, she was able to find this guy that she was currently married to, and the guy accepted Christopher as his son. Unfortunately, this discovery made Christopher very angry, and the relationship between him and his stepdad deteriorated. Now, Christopher couldn't seem to get over the fact that he had this idyllic family dynamic in mind, and he thought this whole world was shattered because of this huge scandal now, because having kids out of wedlock, in the 50s, 60s was a bit taboo. So at 19 years old, Christopher left home and he joined the Navy, and he actually never talked to his stepfather again, which was pretty sad. Now, Christopher had this drive. He was driven to make something of himself. He wanted to be better than his stepfather, who he now viewed as like a low achiever because he was just a printer, and he's raising somebody else's kids. God forbid. Sounds like a horrible guy to me, doesn't to you? Anyway, Christopher wanted to lead this idyllic life that he had in his head. He wanted everybody to love him, think he was so great, all this stuff. The problem, though, is that Christopher didn't want to actually put in the work to get to this life in his head. He would just look for shortcuts, or he would use fraud to put the perception out there that he was successful when he wasn't. I mean, he wanted to be successful, don't get me wrong. I mean, who doesn't, right? But to him, it was more important that people thought he was successful than him actually being successful. So this is where he cared a lot more about what people thought about him than what he actually was. That's a dangerous, dangerous road, buddy. Ugh. Now, in August of 1973, Christopher married at the age of 24, and he settled in Rhode Island. He enrolled in college, and he was majoring in zoology. And then he, in that major, he decided, well, he wanted to be more than that. He actually wanted to be a doctor because doctors are really successful and accepted in the community. So he enrolled in the pre-med program. Now, college was expensive, and, Lee wasn't really bringing in any money, and he had 2 kids by this time, and their money was just running short. Well, he didn't want anything to get in his way. So he planned to actually sell his house that him, his wife, and his kids were living in. His wife, of course, found out about this, wasn't very happy about it. So after 7 years of marriage and 2 children, the two got divorced. Now, Christopher was ordered to pay child support on his 2 children, but we all know he never did. So now a couple years after his divorce, Christopher met Susan at a creamery, like an ice cream factory that he was working at. Susan was actually working at the ice cream factory during the summer because she was working there before she had to go back to college in Ohio. Christopher was 31 years old at this time, and Susan was only 18. Susan was from a very well-off family in the Rhode Island area. And so, he got to know her and the two hit it off. In 1982, about a year after they were dating, they ended up getting married, and they actually settled in Ohio because Susan was still trying to finish college. Now, Christopher would enroll in the same college, which was Rhodes University in Ohio, the same that Susan was attending, but he wanted to continue his PhD. He wanted to continue that pre-med program. But the problem is his transcripts and grades from the Rhode Island college, he pretty much failed all of his classes, and he was not going to be accepted into the pre-med program at Rhodes University. So he did what Christopher does, and he forged his transcripts and his academic qualifications, and then he was accepted into the program. While attending Rhodes University, he came up with a way to earn money by doing pretty much a Ponzi scheme. So he convinced people to invest money with him, and he'd promise, large returns and everything. And he actually told people he knew what he was doing. In reality, he had no idea what he was doing. Now, it didn't take too long after he started this that he was outed as a scammer, and he ended up losing over $100,000 of people's money. Now, despite this, he was never arrested or charged with anything. He was a good talker, a good salesman. He could talk his way out of a lot of things, and he talked his way out of that. Now, his final big exams were coming up, and that he needed to pass these exams to get, his PhD, right? Well, we know he wasn't doing the actual work, and he was probably going to bomb out on his exams. But, he caught a break, if that's what you want to call it. You see, his house caught fire. He filed a claim with insurance. Insurance came through, gave him a big fat check, and him and Susan then moved into an apartment. Now, Christopher was able to get an extension of taking these final exams because, of his sudden tragedy. They were able to, save some items from the house that they put in the apartment, and they kind of threw them in this room. Now, they were clothes and stuff, but included in those were the books from the university that he was studying with to do these final exams. And, wouldn't you know it, just soon after they moved into the apartment, this pile of stuff that was saved from the house suddenly caught fire, and they don't know how that happened, even though there was some gasoline with Christopher's fingerprints all over it. Well, the insurance came back and was like, Oh, hell no. And he was investigated for arson. He somehow, again, talked his way out of it, and he was never charged with arson or anything. But he did approach Rice University, and he requested that, he again be excused from the exams. And actually, he just should be excused to never take the exams because of all this tragedy he went through, and they should just hand him over the PhD. No problem, right? Well, they said no. So Christopher did what Christopher always does. And he never got his PhD. He never took the exams. He just kind of walked away from the college. But instead, he just put that he had a PhD on his resume. So, again, the easy way out. Now, since he couldn't go into any hospital or anything because they request proof of such things, he decided to kind of walk away from the doctor or medical field, and he was going to actually go back into finance, because he was so good at it for his Ponzi scheme. He wanted to kind of shift instead of investing. He wanted, which is the same thing, but he wanted to get into the future trading and commodities division of investing. So at this time, Susan actually graduated from college. She had a legit degree. And the two moved back to her hometown in Barrington, Rhode Island. Now, Christopher and Susan started out by living with Susan's parents when they moved back to Rhode Island. Susan's parents were living in like a big, nice house, and they were upstanding citizens of the community because they were actually good people. Christopher was able then to put out this perception to everyone that he was this upper class person as well, even though he really wasn't, all because he married into this family. So Christopher then started an investment firm in Barrington, Rhode Island, downtown, called Hightower Investments. And, was going to make all this money for people. Buyer beware. Or should I say investor beware. Now, Susan would end up taking a job as a secretary of the local church. This position was formerly held by her mother until her mother retired. So then she just took it over from her mother. Now, soon after, they were kind of settled in Rhode Island, Christopher approached Susan's parents and talked to them about a joint venture of buying a house together, meaning that Christopher and Susan would put up half and Susan's parents would put up half. But then it kind of changed of, you know what, why don't you parents buy the entire house, and then instead of us paying a mortgage company, we'll just pay you that money. And he convinced Susan's parents to do it that way. And we all know how this turns out, don't we? So now Christopher and Susan are living in this very large house in Barrington, Rhode Island. And Christopher is, of course, accepted into the community because he married into this family. And he continues his facade of making a name for himself by, doing good deeds. So he was the Sunday school teacher, and he taught the local kids' soccer team. So doing all this in the community, that is when Christopher met Ernest Brendel. Christopher and Ernest kind of hit it off when they were talking one day because they both discovered that they both started out in pre-med and then went on to other careers. Now, Ernest had left pre-med and actually became a lawyer. Ernest was very easygoing, so he made friends very easily, but he was a big family man, so he spent most of his time with his wife and his child. Now, Ernest's wife, Alice, had a master's degree in library sciences. After Ernest and Alice were married and after the birth of their daughter, Emily, they decided to move to Barrington, Rhode Island from New York to kind of have a slower paced life. So Ernest got a job doing patents, working at home, making good money, and Alice actually worked at the Brown University Library making good money. So the Brendels were well off financially. They took many trips abroad and was even planning on taking their daughter, Emily, who was 8 years old at the time. They were planning her first abroad trip to France. Now, Christopher, of course, picked up on this family's wealth and financial well-offness, and that's how he kind of targeted Ernest to be his friend. So soon, both Christopher's family and Ernest's family started hanging out together, and they even went on vacation together a couple times. Gee, I wonder who paid for those trips. Now, Ernest and Alice trusted Christopher so much that they even put him down at their daughter's school as a trusted person to pick her up if they ever needed him to do so. So Christopher really built trust with them. Now, initially, Ernest opened a trading account with Hightower Investments, but he ended up closing the account 6 months later at a loss. He didn't get the returns he thought he was going to get. But Ernest, being the nice guy he is, just chalked it up to Christopher's business, still being new, still being established, and he was just helping out a friend. So, no harm, no foul. Now, eventually, Christopher convinced Ernest to reopen his account about a year later. Ernest was a bit hesitant, but Christopher showed him this other account where there were some nice large returns, like we're talking $60,000 in a 4-month period. And, that kind of enticed Ernest. Spoiler alert, that account was fake. So Ernest went ahead and reopened his account, and he invested $15,000 in it. Now, after a couple months, Ernest, looking at his account and everything, discovered that his investments were doing terrible and really bad. So he started looking into it a little bit more. Basically, $12,000 of the $15,000 he invested was all squandered within months of his initial deposit. And he realized that that money actually all went into Christopher's pockets, that it wasn't really being invested. He then figured out that the account that Christopher showed him with those big, large returns wasn't a real account and was fake. So Ernest, realizing that Christopher was scamming him and probably scamming others, taking their money, and because Ernest was an overall good guy, wanted to put a stop to this. So he reported Christopher to the Future Tradings and Commodities Commission. So Christopher is now some deep shit. Others that had invested with him are pulling their money, and now he is completely broke. There is no money anywhere. His office phone was disconnected. He owed rent for his office space, and he was about to be evicted from that. And his computer equipment had all been repossessed. Now, Christopher's professional life was crashing down around him, but at least he had his family life, right? Nope. Susan, Christopher's wife, had been unhappy for some time, and she was beginning to realize her husband was a loser. After all, Susan's parents were the ones that bought their house, and when times were tough, aka Christopher didn't have any money or anybody else's money to spend, Susan's parents would buy them food and provisions. So this investigation was pretty much the last straw for Susan, and she told Christopher she wanted a divorce. She was done. This was a huge blow to Christopher, not because, he may love Susan, we don't know, but he was more concerned that his lifestyle of living in this big house, the perception of wealth, and his community standing was going to be just ripped away from him. So Christopher threatened her. Christopher's going to do what Christopher's going to do. He told Susan that, he had associates in the local crime family or mobs around Rhode Island due to his investment connections, and that for $5,000, he could have her killed on a contract, or for as little as $1,000, he could make her disappear and never be found. However, Susan, she didn't believe his bullshit. And she ended up filing a restraining order, and she had him removed and barred from the family home. Atta girl. Now, all of this was coming down on Christopher, and he thought if he could just make this investigation go away, in his mind, everything was going to go back to normal. Because if he could make the investigation go away and just chalk it up to a big misunderstanding, his wife would come back to him, the community would come back to him, everything, right? So Christopher went to Ernest and asked him to please withdraw the complaint to the commission, and they could, work it out some other way. Ernest, being the good guy he is, said, hell no. You frauded me, you frauded others, you can't do it again. That's when Christopher decided that desperate situations call for desperate measures. So Christopher took off and drove to Massachusetts and bought a Bear Devastator crossbow. A crossbow to kill bears with. So on the morning of September 3rd, 1991, the FBI got a phone call from Ernest's sister named Christine, telling them that a man named Christopher Hightower came to her house in Connecticut, because she lived in Connecticut, and told her that he was a friend of her brother's. Christopher went on to tell Christine that her brother and his family had been kidnapped by the mob and was being held for ransom. The story was, from Christopher, of course, is that Ernest had gotten himself into some trouble with the Italian mafia, and he owed him a lot of money. So this mafia apparently kidnapped the family and contacted Christopher and gave him specific instructions that they would not release the family until they got $300,000. At first, Ernest's sister was not believing a word of Christopher's story. I mean, her brother was squeaky clean. Like, there is no way he was involved with any mafia. Then Christopher showed her that he had Ernest's wallet, and he also had Ernest and Alice's wedding rings, which she did find kind of odd. Now, Christopher went on to tell Christine that the mafia allowed Ernest to talk briefly over the phone to him, but it was hard to understand Ernest because they had actually beaten him and broke his jaw, so he was having trouble talking. But what he was able to get out of Ernest was that Ernest had told him that if Christopher went to his sister, she could put up the money and save their lives. Christine's husband was actually a doctor, so you could see how Christopher probably thought they had more money than they did. But Christine told Ernest that she doesn't have that type of money, and she suggested that they should just call the police if this is, because she still wasn't quite believing Christopher's story. So Christopher told her not to call the police because the mafia would be watching. And, oh, by the way, your phone is tapped. So, there's that. Now, again, she was calling bullshit on Christopher's story. So then Christopher took her out to the driveway. And apparently Christopher was driving Ernest's car around, this red Toyota, and Christopher opened the trunk and showed her that the trunk was just like covered in blood, and he said that was the family's blood, and she also noticed that in the back seat of the car there was like this bag of powder. Christopher told her it was just baking soda because, he had no choice but to drive the car, and there was that smell of blood, so the baking soda helped cover that smell while he drove to Connecticut. Now, after promising Christopher that she would get the money, she'd go to the bank in the morning, she just kind of wanted Christopher to leave. Christopher left, and Ernest's sister called the FBI immediately. Good girl. Authorities showed up, and they went to the Brendel family home in Rhode Island, and they looked around. Now, they saw that the garage wall had like this big hole in it, and that somebody had cleaned the place up. They looked all around the house, the property, and they could not find any of the Brendel family at all. So their next step was they needed to find Christopher. So they started looking around town for Christopher, and he actually isn't hard to find. Christopher isn't trying to hide or anything, by no means. He's just driving around town doing God knows what, but he's still driving Ernest's car with all the blood in the trunk, his crossbow, and there was a bag of lye in the back. Yeah, that bag was not baking soda. It was a bag of lye. So they arrest Christopher and start asking him questions. Christopher states that due to his marital issues, that Ernest had offered Christopher a place to stay while he worked his marital issues out. And so, of course, his fingerprints are going to be all over the house. He then tells the cops about the mob story and the kidnapping and all that. And he stays adamant that he had nothing to do with the Brendels' disappearance or kidnapping or anything. He was just trying to, save them. So authorities looked for the Brendels for weeks and to no avail. And of course, Christopher is no help. Relatives and friends end up, after a couple weeks, actually holding a funeral for the family because of the amount of blood in the back of that trunk. There's no way anybody could survive that. So things weren't looking good, and they just figured the family was dead. So in November of 1991, a woman was walking with her dog. The dog ran into these bushes, wooded area, and she went in after the dog. That's when she came across 2 shallow graves in the ground with some white powder look like on top, and she called the police. So authorities arrived on scene and determined in the graves, unfortunately, it was the Brendel family. When they, excavated the graves officially looking for everything, they found a piece of plastic, which was actually the corner of a bag of lye, and it matched the bag of lye that was in the back seat of the car that Christopher was driving. During the autopsies, they found 2 bolts, of the crossbows in earnest that would be shot from a bear Devastator crossbow, one in his chest and one in his back. Now, Christopher had been in jail ever since he was picked up initially, but he was in for grand theft auto, extortion, illegal possession of a firearm. Apparently, he had a sawed-off shotgun in his office, so that's what they could kind of keep him on. And then he had some stolen credit cards too. So he was really in this fraud thing. But now, since they found the family's bodies, they could add 3 counts of murder to his charges. So again, they would question Christopher, but Christopher would never admit to being a part of the murders or being responsible for anything. And so this is what authorities pieced together what happened to the family through their investigation. It was believed that after Christopher bought the crossbow in Massachusetts, he came back to Rhode Island and he started staking out the Brendel family. The morning of the murders, Ernest took his wife to work, and Christopher had snuck into the garage and waited. When Ernest came home, Christopher appeared from his hiding spot and shot him in the chest with the crossbow bolt. Ernest did not die there. He actually fell to the floor, but he started crawling away, then shot him again in the back. Christopher then took a crossbow and beat Ernest's head in to make sure that he was dead. He then would put Ernest in the trunk of his own car. Then Christopher went to Emily's school. Now remember, he was one of the trusted people to, pick her up. So he picks Emily up from school, brings her back to the house, and he then gives her a bunch of Benadryl, and she just kind of knocks out. She's kind of overdosing on Benadryl. She's asleep. Alice had to take the bus home because, Ernest never showed up to pick her up. So when she arrived at the house, Christopher would end up strangling her with some sort of clothing or scarf. Christopher then would load the family up in the car, drive out to the wooded area, and he dug 2 shallow graves. He put Ernest in one grave, and then he put Alice and Emily in the second grave. He then put lye on the bodies to speed up the decomposition process, and then, covered them up and buried them. Here's the bad part. Not that that's not bad enough, but Emily, the 8-year-old, she wasn't dead when he put her in that grave. She was still breathing. She was just unconscious from all the Benadryl. So he essentially buried this poor girl alive. After that, he then returned to the Brendel's home, and using Ernest's computer, he forged a letter to the Future Trading and Commodities Commission, retracting the complaint on himself, saying it was from Ernest. So Christopher goes on trial, and he continues to try to get out of being found guilty. He says he was insane, which is not true. He said Ernest was dealing heroin, which of course was not true. He stated Ernest was blackmailing him to commit fraud in his own investment firm, stuff like that. Christopher did testify on the stand against his lawyer's advice that he was forced to witness the murders that the mob carried out, that 4 mob hitmen did, but of course that didn't happen either. He made up details that weren't true. He tried telling all these fairy tales. He faked emotion. He even stated in a quivering voice, trying to hold back tears, but there's no tears, of course, of who can kill a child. Authorities had a pretty precise timeline. Christopher's fantasy tale did not distract from the actual facts in the case. So the jury found Christopher guilty on all charges, which there was a lot: murder, kidnapping, fraud, grand theft auto, the list goes on. So he's sentenced to 3 life sentences without the possibility of parole. Shortly after beginning his sentences, he was attacked by other inmates in the jail, and he requested to transfer, which he did get. He also filed many lawsuits against the jailers over the years, saying that he was treated unfairly. One lawsuit cited that one officer wrote him up for behavior violations, which he actually did have in the library of the jail. So all those suits were dismissed. It never went anywhere. He eventually ended up at Menard Correctional Facility in Illinois, and he is now 73 years old. Moral of the story: stop worrying about what other people think and just enjoy your life. If you want to be a success, put in the work to do it. Don't try to fake it. There are no shortcuts in life, but you all know that. One of the psychologists that actually examined Christopher during the trial stated he would give you the creeps. No humanity at all. You look into his eyes and you see no soul. There is nothing there. It's just hardcore evil personified. So I'd love to hear what you think in the comments down below. If you'd like to become a feline friend, just hit that subscribe button. And if you would like to become a feline fan, hit that join button for special perk. Thank you, everyone, and I will see you in the next true crime case or mystery video. Bye.